Hello again to another Agriculture Reacts, and today we will be watching how one hurricane could lead to a global tech shortage from SciShow. And let's just go in because honestly, I'm kind of interested. Will there be tech shortage, and what does that actually imply? What kind of tech shortage? I'm guessing it will be something to do with the microchips again, is it?
In September 2024, Hurricane Helene struck the southeastern US, causing widespread damage to lots of regions that rarely see storms as severe as this one. The mountains in western North Carolina were hit particularly hard, with entire towns washed away by the flooding. It will probably be months or even years before the region fully recovers. But the disaster could have an unexpected impact on the rest of the world, too. Specifically on our technology, because pretty much every silicon computer chip in the world exists thanks to one mineral deposit in a tiny town in the North Carolina mountains.
Interesting.
This story begins about 450 million years ago with something called the tectonic orogeny, one of the many phases of tectonic activity that formed the Appalachian Mountains. As two tectonic plates converged, dense oceanic crust was pushed under the roots of the continental plate, forming sheets of rock that were thrust over existing layers, fittingly called thrust sheets. The friction between these two plates raised the temperature enough to melt the solid rock below. That molten magma then forced its way up through the surrounding rocks, creating huge blobs of granite called plutons and big cracks filled with volcanic fluid called pegmatites. When this happens, that volcanic fluid cools down and the minerals in it form crystals. The longer this cooling process takes, the bigger the crystals. And because all this was happening so deep in the crust, the fluid in the cracks solidified extremely slowly, allowing it to separate out into big, pure mineral crystals. Fast forward a few 100 million years, and the movement of the tectonic plates eventually brings the plutons and the pegmatites closer to the Earth's surface, in the Blue Ridge Mountains in North Carolina, near the small town of Spruce Pine. The pegmatites in Spruce Pine are made up of about 65% feldspar, 25% quartz, and 8% mica. As a bonus, there are some gemstones like aquamarine and emerald mixed in too. And because of all of these great crystals, people have mined the area for thousands of years. Historically, Native Americans living in the region would extract mica and carve it into figurines or use it as currency. Then, during the late 1800s, Spruce Pine became a full-on mining town. But the funny thing is, even though nowadays the region is most famous for its quartz, they were mining out pretty much everything except quartz. The big flat sheets of mica made great stove windows and electrical insulators, and the feldspars were used in ceramics and glassmaking. Extracting the feldspar involved crushing up the rock, submerging it in water, and using air to skim off what you want. Everything else, including the quartz, was considered waste and thrown away. It took a while for anyone to realize just how special that quartz really was. See, even though it's the second most common mineral in our Earth's crust, not all quartz is created equal. When the crystals grow, sometimes little impurities get stuck in there too. And sometimes that's considered a good thing, since that's how we get the fancy varieties of quartz like amethyst or agate. But the impurities change more than just the color of the crystal. They can also change its physical and chemical properties, which can make it weaker. So while amethyst looks great on your bookshelf, it's less great in the kinds of industrial applications where you really need consistency and predictability. For these applications, high purity quartz becomes the special sauce. This purity is measured in percentages of inclusions or in parts per million. A medium level of purity is considered to be quartz with 0.1% other elements mixed in, or 100 parts per million of impurities. While the highest purity quartz has no more than 0.003% or 30 parts per million of other stuff. And that quartz at Spruce Pine that people used to think was waste, well, it turned out that it had fewer impurities than any other natural quartz we've found, at just between 25.9 and 13.4 parts per million. When the mining companies in Spruce Pine noticed the purity of their so-called waste quartz, they started selling it too. And in the beginning, it was used to make everyday glass products like bottles and windows. It was even used to make a 5-meter wide, 20-ton mirror for a telescope that was built in the 1940s and is still in use today. But Spruce Pine's quartz really got its big break with the dawn of the digital age, when the world began to run on silicon-based computer chips. Today, silicon chips run pretty much all of our modern technology. They're in our computers, phones, and tablets, and pretty much anything else that goes beep, from barcode scanners to wind turbines, and even in your pets, if they've got microchips. To make these fancy chips, the ideal mineral to use is silicon, because it's a semiconductor. A semiconductor is just a thing that can either conduct electricity or insulate against it, depending on the other chemical elements that are added to it. So because the exact chemical makeup of your semiconductor changes its properties, for a consistent microchip product, you need super pure silicon. All chips start out as a slice of a single perfect silicon crystal, which is manufactured using something called the Czochralski process. It starts with pure quartz sand, which gets heated up with carbon to remove the oxygen, leaving behind 98% pure silicon. Then you do a few other chemical processes to increase the purity to somewhere around 0.01 parts per billion. That means that for every 100 billion atoms of silicon, you only have a single atom of something else. This ultra pure silicon is then put into a crucible and heated to precisely 1413 degrees Celsius to melt it down into silicon soup. You then dip a seed crystal of silicon into the top surface of the molten silicon pool and drag it upwards very slowly so it grows into a crystal of exactly the right shape. The result is a perfect cylindrical crystal of silicon called a boule with no irregularities and nothing else mixed in. Finally, the boule is cut into circular wafers roughly 0.5 millimeter thick, which are polished and made into countless computer chips. So this whole thing starts with quartz, and we've been obsessed with purity. So you'd think that the spruce pine quartz is what makes those chips, right? Wrong. See, even though the Czochralski process starts with quartz, that quartz gets purified a ton anyway, so you can take any old junky quartz and turn it into silicon chips. So you don't need spruce pine quartz to make the chips, you need it to make the crucible. For those of us who skipped blacksmithing lessons, a crucible is just a container that you melt stuff in. It needs to be heat resistant enough to hold your melted stuff, and it also needs to be made of something that isn't reactive and won't taint that melted stuff either. They're usually made of metal or clay or porcelain, or in this case, extremely pure quartz. Crucibles for the Czochralski process are made by taking ultra pure quartz sand and heating it up to fuse it into shape. The final product has a melting temperature of around 1700 degrees Celsius. And these crucibles don't last forever. Over time, the molten silicon starts to eat away at the crucible, which is exactly why it needs to be so pure. Any impurities in the crucible have a chance of getting into your liquid silicon, which could affect how the crystal grows. The purer your crucible, the less chance of that happening. So it seems like a simple thing, but the silicon semiconductor industry really hinges on the supply.
Nope. Could be surprised there. Okay, so I was thinking that yeah, they're gonna, like I said, something to do with the microchips. I think the microchips are actually made from quartz. Well, they make kind of from quartz, kind of from silicon, isn't it? And they need that quartz to make the crucible. Like, I'm learning a lot from it. Because honestly, it's just like, it's not something that I obviously would know about. Because I'm not big into like melting stuff, if you know what I mean. So yeah. And what's this? Ads and ads. Free fast delivery over €75. Woohoo! Okay, we're back. And I was saying something, but I got distracted. I don't even know what to say because honestly I don't know much about it, so how would I?
Of these ultra pure quartz crucibles. Bad crucibles means bad crystals, no usable silicon wafers, and no, well, anything technological, really. In 2015, it was estimated that we used around 30,000 tons of ultra pure quartz per year, and up to 90% of that comes from spruce pine. Plus, in the nearly 10 years since that figure came out, it's almost guaranteed that that number's gone up. Not bad for a town with just 2,500 people. But that's ultimately what makes the situation so precarious. It's a single point of failure for a multi-billion-dollar industry, which brings us back to the storm that got so many people talking about this place. Hurricane Helene struck spruce pine in the early hours of September 27, 2024. It had been downgraded to a tropical storm by the time it got there, but the storm still did a surprising amount of damage, roads and buildings were destroyed or washed away, and thousands of people lost power or water to their homes. As of recording, there are at least 96 confirmed deaths and dozens more who are still missing. And because of all this devastation, the quartz mines have shut down and only one is back up and running, meaning that the world's supply of ultra-pure quartz will be impacted for as long as the other mine is down, and possibly for longer as they both try to make up for lost time. Now, there are some other deposits of ultra-pure quartz in places like Russia, China, and Brazil, but none are quite as pure or as plentiful as the quartz from spruce pine. And while it's technically possible to purify lower quality quartz or to make synthetic ultra-pure quartz, nobody is really doing either of those things at an industrial scale. They've never had to, because spruce pine quartz has always been there. Until now. To be clear, there isn't any reason to panic and start hoarding silicon chips like toilet paper in 2020. Plenty of companies have stockpiles of silicon wafers for situations just like this, so the mine being closed isn't an immediate problem for computer chip production. But if mining is down for more than a few months and that stockpile becomes depleted, then we could be looking at a major supply chain issue for basically the whole tech world. The last time something like this happened was during the pandemic, when everyone realized they didn't want to be stuck inside without a screen, and demand for tablets, computers, and consoles temporarily but expensively outstripped supply. But this time, it would be the other way around. The world would still have its everyday demand for computer chips, but the supply would be the issue. As availability of the remaining wafers diminished, prices for all tech could skyrocket, not just the stuff you can watch YouTube videos on. And we don't know how bad the problem really is. Ultra-pure quartz mining is a secretive business, so the mining companies have thus far been pretty cagey about just how bad the damage was. For now, we'll just have to sit tight and wait and see. It's kind of crazy to think about how every piece of technology we use, from microwaves to TVs and cell phones to singing greeting cards, could only exist because of one place. One weird quirk of geology, when two plates collided, gave us the exact ingredient we needed to be able to make any of this possible. So thanks Spruce Pine for being the unofficial partner and sponsor of basically everything we've ever looked at on a screen. We owe you one.
Oh yeah, in a big way too, apparently. Cause like, yeah, you think, oh, you have to do the microchips and all that, then you have to have tools to make them too. Kinda never really thought about it that. So how do you make tools to make microchips? They're gonna need something for it, isn't it? Yeah. I don't have much to add because they kinda explain everything there. So yeah. Thank you very much for watching and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye!